welcome you to our latest webinar of our series. One of the CCIG's goals is to encourage the sharing of our information and help educate fellow contractors in the latest of what's going on, as well as sometimes remembering things that we have forgotten. This presentation on Business 101, I think will do that. We've got a couple of other coming up webinars that I'd like to highlight before we introduce our guest speaker. Make sure to mark on your calendars for March 20th. We've got Linda Whiteman out of Hunter going to be talking about careers in irrigation. And in April, mark on the 17th, we've got Goldman Sachs. Well, we've got Joe Gross from Goldman Sachs coming to speak to us during the webinar. Each of those webinars starts at 2 o'clock, goes till 3. There will be a slide later in the webinar that we have today showing that information as well, so if you didn't have a pencil to write down the dates, you will have that in a moment. So let's go ahead and get started. I will introduce John Farner as our representative to a connection to the IA staff, and he will proceed with introducing our guest. John?
Great, thanks, Mel. I appreciate it. Appreciate your leadership from the Contractor Common Interest Group with the Irrigation Association and putting together this webinar series in 2015, I think. We've had a good one so far, and I'm really excited to hear our speaker today. Before we get started, however, I want to go ahead and go over some housekeeping for the webinar. Those of you who have attended IA webinars in the past have seen this exact screen. Basically, just two main things. One, this webinar is being recorded. So if you want to reference anything that our speaker says or go back and listen to it at another time, you can go ahead and visit our website, irrigation.org/webinar series. This is also the website you can go to sign up for future webinars, whether it's a Contractor Common Interest Group webinar, a Bringing Water to Life series webinar, or one of our Education Network webinars. They are all listed on that website right there. So it's a one-stop shop to sign up for our webinars and see of any that are coming down the pike and review any of them that already occurred. Secondly, we anticipate more than 40 to 50 people on this webinar. So if you have any questions, we're going to go ahead and ask that you type them into the little question box that's in your GoToWebinar toolbar right there. This helps us facilitate questions a little bit easier. It allows you, if you have any questions that pop up during Steve's presentation, to go ahead and type those in. I will go ahead and pull those together, and at the end of Steve's presentation today, we'll go ahead and have a brief, moderated question and answer session to go ahead and answer any questions you may have during the webinar. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. His name is Steve Keating. He is the Senior Manager of Sales and Leadership Development with the Toro Company. Steve has actually been with Toro since 1996. Currently works primarily with Toro's commercial or RLC, underground irrigation, and international business. He's responsible for the implementation of the Toro selling system and leadership development within all U.S. and international distributors across all Toro businesses. He's also developer of Toro Professional Sales Certification Process, which was introduced in 2004 and has more than 31 years of sales and sales management experience and speaks a dozen times per year on issues related to the one we're hearing about today. So I'm really excited to hear Steve speak. Hopefully you are too. And Steve, I'm going to go ahead and change the control of the webinar over to you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. I know we have a wonderful day of weather throughout the U.S., and I'm just glad that the internet lines and the phone lines haven't completely frozen over, so we're able to go ahead and do this today. We're going to spend a fast hour or so together, really going back to some of the basics of business and really the basics of acquiring business and earning our customers trust enough to do business with us. So we're going to begin today talking about the sales presentation and about the words that we use or maybe don't use when we're in a selling situation with our customers. And so the first one we want to talk about, it really is focus of the sales call. You know, when we make a sales call, we obviously have some level of control over that. We want to try to control it as much as we possibly can, but it surprises me, as long as I've been in sales and for the different products and services I've sold, which aren't many, but they're varied enough, that I've worked with a lot of different types and skill levels of salespeople, and it's surprising to me the number of salespeople who will initiate a sales conversation with little or no preparation. And a lot of times that happens because we've done this so long, we know what we're doing, and we don't really need to spend a great deal of time preparing. But let me tell you about a guy that sold life insurance for a large, well-known life insurance company, and he sold for them for 51 years. And for 51 consecutive years, he was their top life insurance salesperson in this very large company, and he literally sold billions and billions of dollars worth of life insurance. And I got to know him a little bit years ago during my time with Dale Carnegie Training, and he was a very unique individual. And I saw him towards the very end of his career in an office building in downtown Minneapolis, and he was standing outside of this office door talking to himself. And as a very caring and sensitive kind of guy, my first thought was, well, geez, the poor old guy, he's out there talking to himself now. I mean, when's enough enough? He should have quit 10 years ago. And I walked up to him and said, you know, Bob, what's going on? What are you doing? And then what he said to me spoke volumes. He said, well, I am preparing to go in here and make a sales call, and I'm just practicing what I'm going to say. So at that point, he'd been selling life insurance for 50 years, and he was preparing to go make a sales call, and he was outside talking to himself, just practicing how he was going to start that sales call. Now, I don't think there's any coincidence as to the reason he was #1 for 51 consecutive years. He wouldn't think, with all of the awards and all of the commissions that he'd earned, with all of the experience he had, he still wouldn't think about going into a sales call without preparing for it, without practicing how he was going to begin and end it. And we'll talk about that here a little bit more in a minute. But if a guy with that level of success and a person with that level of experience still felt the need to prepare and literally practice for his sales calls, then I can't imagine there's any of us that wouldn't benefit from it as well. So what I want to start with is the fact that preparing is going to make a huge difference. We need to understand the words that we're going to use in our sales presentation. And if I were to ask you to describe what you do in one sentence, and a relatively short sentence at that, could you tell me? Could you tell me, if I woke you up at 3 o'clock in the morning out of a dead sleep, why I should do business with you? Are you that clear on that? And if you're not, you may be guilty of kind of a fuzzy focus. That tends to make us try to say too much at once, and we confuse our listener, and confused listeners do not buy from us. So we need to decide before we make a sales call exactly what we need to accomplish with this contact, and determine what would be a positive outcome. How will we know that it was a good interaction with this customer if we don't have an objective for the call, if you will, and some measurable, how will we know that the objective was reached? So imagine that somebody tells you, okay, I'm interested in what you do, but you have 10 minutes to tell me what it is you want me to know about your customer. And in one sentence, tell me how you would describe your benefits. Can we do that? Are we prepared to do that? Some people would call that an elevator speech, but it's amazing to me. And here's another example of it. You know, voicemail today is a fact of life. Although I'm told there are some rather large companies, like Coca-Cola, for instance, in Atlanta, who no longer use voicemail. They use text messaging. So if you called Coke in Atlanta today and there was no one there, apparently you'd get a voicemail message that would say, call back or text this number and leave a message. They don't use voicemail anymore, but we still get voicemail a lot. And if you're like me, sometimes when you leave a voicemail or you get somebody's voicemail message, you hear that beep, and that beep like deadens our brain, you know, and suddenly we're not sure what we should say. It's like we're surprised because we'd never gotten voicemail before, and so we stutter and we stammer a little bit, and that doesn't make us look as professional as we probably want to look. So if you're going to have an outbound call to a customer, before you pick up that phone, decide exactly with crystal clarity what it is you want to say and be prepared to say it after the beep. By the way, as long as we're on to that, leaving a voicemail message, a lot of us don't have a great deal of success in getting a return call from a voicemail message, and that's because we don't actually leave a message. Typically, when we hear the beep, we'll leave our name and phone number and not give the person a compelling reason to call us back. So our recommendation is that when we hear the beep, we give the person a reason to call us back. We tell them why we called, we told them what we wanted to talk about on the call, and then we give them a slight benefit, just a teaser of a benefit. If these things are of interest to you, you and I need to talk as soon as possible. Call me back at and leave your number, but give them a reason to call. Back in the olden days when we'd come back into the office and we'd have these while you were out, some of us are old enough to remember that, you'd have these pink slips that said while you were out, and someone would have a name and a number on them, and some would have a name and a number, and then the 3 little lines of space filled in with what the message was. And almost the huge percentage, 90% of the people called back the ones that had something written in the message lines first. They were the first ones to get called back, and some of the other ones actually never even got called back. So if you want more people to call you back when you leave a message, give them a reason to call you back. Another challenge that we have with sales calls is we don't have a real clear structure. We don't make it easy for our prospect to follow what we're trying to say. And it doesn't make any difference if this is in a casual conversation or a formal presentation of what our suggestion or recommendations as far as products go. So we have to make it easier to follow along for them to remember. If you don't have some structure in mind before you begin a presentation, you end up forgetting the key point, and then you start jumping around. You begin to waffle a little bit. You might ramble a little bit, and you eventually lose your listeners. And even in a conversation, if you mentally outline what your objectives are, you'll be better off, and people will be able to follow along with you a whole lot more effectively. So think about the structure of your presentation, what phrases you want to use, you know, the things that you might have to repeat a couple of times to make sure. Are you going to use some sort of word picture or graphics to illustrate each point? It doesn't have to be a ton of planning, but 5 or 10 minutes of planning will make all the difference in the world, and your customers will recognize the effort that you put into planning because they can easily tell an unprepared salesperson. And the reason we know they can tell an unprepared salesperson is because we can, and our customers are exactly like we are. Talking too much is like the death of many people in a business or sales conversation. And usually what we talk too much about is we talk too much about ourselves or our products. And we tend to make a speech rather than having an exchange or what's better known as a conversation. And we tend to focus the conversation on us, and it becomes more of a monologue rather than a dialogue with our customers. So the key to connecting to a customer is in conversation, is in engaging them in that. And one of the best ways to do that as a salesperson is to ask really kind of succinct questions, if you will. The best salespeople, the salespeople that sell the most, the salespeople that sell at the highest margins, and the salespeople that have the most repeat business are all the salespeople that ask the best questions. And I don't think that that's a coincidence that they ask the best questions. And we're going to talk here a little bit later on about the motives of our customers for buying, And we're going to revisit that issue of questions at that point. Another thing that we want to do in our sales presentations is to have some memorable stories. When we don't have any memorable stories that the customer can kind of hang our benefits on, if you will, then it becomes difficult for them to remember why they should buy from us when they're talking to 2 or 3 of our competitors. And so think of it this way. People rarely remember our exact words, but they do remember the mental images that our words inspire. So try to support your key points with as vivid as possible relevant stories. What we say is to kind of help them make a movie in their mind by using memorable characters and exciting situations, humor if you can, so long as it's appropriate humor. People might tell you that I love humor, but sometimes my humor isn't always appropriate. I hope you don't experience that today. But telling stories of satisfied customers and painting a picture of how this client's condition or a former customer's condition was improved with your product or service is absolutely excellent. Here's one thing to keep in mind. If you're in a salesperson role, almost everyone you interact with will have some issues of trust with you. You may have never even came close to even hinting at a lie with a customer. But what you need to realize is that at some point in their lifetime, the customer you're talking to at that moment has been lied to by a customer or by a salesperson. And because a different salesperson lied to them, your credibility is also thrown into question. And so whatever fact or benefit you're telling your customer, you need to realize that in the back of their mind, they're saying, well, who says so besides you? And the sooner we answer that question, the better. And so one of the ways that we answer that question, who else says so besides you, is with stories of other satisfied customers so that they will believe the other person. We'll talk about word-of-mouth advertising here at the end, and you'll see how important that really is. So when we're preparing for a sales presentation, we need to have third-party or third-person endorsements in our back pocket. There's a limit to how many good things we can say about ourselves or our company. And a lot of us, by the way, just don't have, we're a little bit too humble in a sales situation, or more humble than we should be. And so we won't say all the good things about our company or about ourselves, about our experience and about why they should do business with us. We feel like we're bragging if we say, well, we have 26 years of experience and we do the best work. But I'll tell you what, while you may feel limited to speak up about your company, there is no limit to the words of praise you can put in the mouths of your other customers. Use case histories of your past successes with customers. Use the things they've told you. Ask for testimonials from your previous customers that you can share with prospects. I had a guy, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, that he put a water heater in our home the day before a holiday at our home in Phoenix, and we were just thrilled with how we called him like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and he had the water heater installed by 5 o'clock, and he didn't charge us an arm and a leg. He hauled the old one away. The service was just great. And I told him how much I appreciated the great service, and he said, well, could I ask you for a quick favor? And I said, yeah, sure. And he said, would you give me a testimonial? If I shot a little video on my phone, could you just say again what you just told me about the service I gave you and how it worked out for you? And so he turned on the video on his iPhone, and I talked for about 20 seconds, and wham, we're done. And that guy has just an absolute perfect live or not live, but videotaped testimonial, a third-party endorsement that he can now use to tell other customers why to do business with him. And what the research says is that they're going to believe me even more than they'll believe him as a salesperson, because I didn't have any motives, and like it or not, when you're in a sales situation, the people that you're trying to sell to, they at least a little bit question your motives because you've got skin in the game. You're going to make money off of this transaction, and so they're not certain they can trust everything you say, but they will trust other people. So think about that. It's a new idea. At least it was new to me, to do a little bit of a video testimonial, if you will. And if you've got a website or whatever, ask for permission to put that out on your website as well. It answers the question of who else says so besides you. So the next issue that we sometimes fall into when we're in a selling situation is we fail to make an emotional connection, and there's no emotional connection with our customers. Now, I know that we are in kind of a male-dominated industry here, and so being mostly guys in the business, we don't buy on emotion, and we're certainly not going to sell on emotion. But the reality of it is that even the most hardcore buyer buys on emotion. They expect something out of our product that our product wasn't maybe designed to do, and we'll talk about that here a little bit more too. But we need to try to connect emotionally with our customers, and that's pretty hard for us to do a lot of times because it feels weird, if you will, and it feels kind of awkward, almost corny. But I'll tell you what, it's an unfair advantage almost for us. If we're able to create an emotional connection and our competitor didn't, we flat out will earn that business if we have that emotional connection. And we'll talk a little bit more a bit later in the presentation on how to achieve that emotional connection. And then another issue that we have is irritating non-words. I don't know if that's the right way to describe them, but that's the way a lot of professional presenters describe them. It's the and 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 lots of ums, and a few of those are okay. I don't mind those a whole lot, but too many of them can be kind of a challenge. I heard a presenter one time start virtually every sentence with "now" as he scanned his notes to figure out what came next, and that might be okay occasionally, but not every sentence and not every 10 seconds. We need to practice our sales presentations a bit to tend to get rid of that. And it's not a terrible idea to occasionally practice in somebody else that can give us feedback, to occasionally practice and video ourselves a little bit to see what we look like when we're making a sales presentation. I present frequently, but I don't always get a lot of feedback. Yesterday, I did a presentation for a bunch of our dealers here at Toro, and I had one of my colleagues in the back of the room, not a professional presenter or anything, but said, are you right-handed, or do you favor the right side of the room? Because did you know that you look at the right side of the room probably 80% of the time and the left side of the room only 20% of the time? That was incredibly valuable feedback to me, and I almost felt that I was doing that. But I didn't realize it until, I didn't worry about it until it was pointed out to me, and it's like, that's really something I need to make note of so I can work on that. We need to choose our words carefully enough so that we don't put so many filler words in there that we begin distracting our listener from what we're trying to say to them. And that's a challenge for a lot of us. It's really a challenge if we're a little bit of a nervous presenter, even when we're presenting one-on-one across somebody from their kitchen table or in their backyard or on a work site. We need to be careful in choosing our words and make sure that they're not distracting words by using non-words. So we get this opportunity to make a sale. And I hear from salespeople all the time that the one reason they don't really plan their sales call is because they never really know how a sales call is going to go. And I just hate canned sales presentations. And so I would never teach that style of selling. I've seen it done. I've had it used on me. It's like somebody's memorized a script, and it's like, this is just crap. And so I want nothing to do with that, and I would never encourage you to do that. Because the fact of the matter is, our customers seldom have the same script, so it doesn't work. And it sounds manipulative, it sounds phony, it sounds whatever you want to say it is. However, there are two parts of every sales presentation that we have complete control over, and that is the opening and the closing. And we can make that opening and closing as strong or as weak as we want it to be. So let me ask you, when you're beginning a sales call and you're in the truck and now we're going to head in or go out and see the customer face to face, how many times as you're walking up to that person do you know what the first words out of your mouth are going to be? Because if it's simply, hi, I'm glad we had the opportunity to well, get together, or I was just going by and thought I'd stop in, or whatever. Those are such weak openings. And if we think about our customer a little bit, and we're going to talk about our specific customers here in a minute, but if we think about our customer and think about something in terms of their interest, and by the way, now that I've uttered that phrase, in terms of their interest, I would also encourage you to speak as much as possible in terms of your customer's interest, not your interest. So many times we start a sales presentation by talking about ourselves or our company, and what we want to do is talk about our prospect first. And this doesn't make them egotistical or bad people, but they are far more interested in themselves than they are the salesperson that they are talking to. They want to know what you can do for them, and they want to know it as soon as possible. So let's go ahead and tell them as soon as possible. So open with as powerful a statement as you can, and it might be things like, you know, you have an awesome responsibility here of maintaining this green space or taking care of these fields or whatever it is, but focus in on a need they have. And then when we close that presentation, we want to know, and we can know in fairly good detail before the presentation even starts what we want to say at the end of it. So, and by the way, where appropriate, I would encourage you at the end of the sales presentation to always ask for something that moves the sales process forward. You may not be able to always ask for the order, but you can certainly ask for another meeting, to meet another decision maker in the loop, to take your customer to another site to see some work you've done. You need to get something out of your time with this customer. And if that doesn't sound good, I know it doesn't necessarily sound great, but we don't have the luxury of being a professional visitor. We're professional salespeople. And I know there's some of you guys on the line too that would say, well, I'm a contractor, I'm a designer, I'm not a sales guy, but I'll tell you what, if we're going to keep the doors open, you can't afford to have anybody in your organization that's not in sales to some extent. And so if we've invested a half hour, an hour and a half of our time with this prospect, we must get something for that time. So maybe it's a referral. We ask for somebody else who we might be able to help. If at all possible, we should ask for the order, get the business. Here's an amazing statistic. It hasn't really changed much over the last 30 years that I've been doing this, but they do the research periodically. And here's what the research says, that 92% of all sales calls end without the salesperson asking for something. And if you did nothing else from this hour-long web conference except ask for more business, if you did nothing else different except ask for more business, you would get more business. And by the way, ask directly. for the business when you ask for the business. When I was early in my sales career, my first sales manager says, you know, how often do you ask for the order or ask for something? And I said, well, every time. And he said, well, let me give me an example. How do you ask for the order? And I said things like, well, what do you think? Well, what do you think is not an order asking question, you know? And then I would say, well, you'll let me know, right? And that's not an order asking question. An order asking question is, well, if it appears to you that I'm going to be able to meet your needs, may I have your business? Just ask straight out. You as a professional salesperson, if you've done a good job of understanding what your customers' needs are, and you have done a good job of showing how you can meet those needs, how the product you have and the experience you have can meet those needs, then you've earned the right to ask for the business. And the research also shows that the customer actually expects you to, and all they're waiting on to say yes is for us to ask. And 92% of the time, we don't ask. And at least half of that time, if we did, we'd get the order. So if you do nothing else, ask for more in the closing of your sales presentation, and you'll likely get more. So let's talk a bit about knowing our customers. The reality of it is that we can't be all things to all people. And so we need to develop kind of target markets, if you will, the band of customers or the demographic of the customers that we're going to go after. And the quickly and more precisely we identify those customers, the ones that we're most likely to be able to help, the more that we can target our efforts and, I guess, waste less time in chasing people that aren't really going to buy from us a whole lot. So it doesn't have to be expensive or complex to be able to identify these customers. Here's a really neat tool for you to understand the demographics in the region or the cities or counties that you sell in, that you work in. You can just do a Google search and find something called, and you just go to Google and type in country and city data book. And it's like a 1,200-page document from the Census Bureau, the most recent census data and every area in the country is in there. And it'll tell you about the type of people that live in your territory. It'll give you some of their lifestyles, choices, their factors, how much they make. It tells you information about whether there's a lot of foot traffic in the area. It tells you if there's a lot of parks and the square footage of parks and recreational areas and schools in the area. It really gives you a ton of information on the types of things that are, the type of people that live in the area, the types of businesses that are there, their size, their revenues, all kinds of information like that, so you can really understand the demographics of a certain area. You may want to do a small marketing campaign. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's a ton of different pieces of information out there to help you understand the area that you're selling in a whole lot more. So once we've identified who our customers are, we can kind of begin to target our customers a little bit. And every one of our customers have two different types of what we call motives. And those motives are either a task motive or a personal motive. And this is pretty simple in the irrigation business. Our customers all want to irrigate something. Either they're going to irrigate turf, they're going to irrigate a sports field, a golf course, a college campus, their yard, or whatever. And they want to keep something green growing. That's their task motive. An additional task motive is they may want to do it less expensive, they may want to do it quicker, they may want to be more productive, they may not want to, they may be sick and tired of hauling hoses around their yard, and it's time to be able to sit on the deck and enjoy the yard, so we're going to put an irrigation system in. Those are task motives. And in our industry, there are very few task motives They have something to do with less cost, less hassle, greater productivity, things like that. However, that's the need. The task motive is associated with a customer's needs. And by and large, most salespeople are very good at understanding their customer's need. The need is the logical reason why they would buy. The problem with that is that people don't buy on logic. They buy on emotion. And so if we're only able to uncover their logical reasons for buying, our closing percentages are 25% of what they could be if we understood their emotional reasons for buying. And the emotional reasons for buying are what we call their personal motives. So I work at Toro. I got to have a good yard. I've got a house here in Minnesota, and I got a big yard. It's a whole lot of grass in that yard. We've got a bunch of flower beds, and my neighbors know I work at Toro, and I've got to keep up the Toro image, and so I want that yard to be the best in the neighborhood. And I had a guy come over a couple of years ago. We had it during National Night Out. He said, "Ken, I've got something really weird to ask you," and it was really weird, by the way. He wanted to know if he could take his shoes off and walk in my yard because he looked at the grass across the street for a couple of years, and he just couldn't believe it, and he wanted to walk on barefoot in the yard. And it's like, yeah, you know, I'm good with that. And we had a couple other people we met at the National Night Out, and they said, "Where do you live?" And we're down there in the corner, and they said, "Oh, the yard." And yep, so my personal motive was met. People noticed a difference in my yard. And that's an example of a personal motive. You know, my dad had the best yard in the neighborhood, and I want to have the best yard. That's a personal motive. If you know, it could very well be that you've got a new homeowner in the neighborhood, and they have the worst yard in the neighborhood, and they got to keep up with the Joneses next door, and so they call you and they say, you know, I need an irrigation system, and it's got to work really good. And so we start to sell them an irrigation system that works really good, but we're only addressing the task motive with a couple of additional questions. Well, tell me, why is an irrigation system so important to you, and why are we talking about this now? And if you get that customer to say, well, you know what, look around. Look at my neighbor's yards. I'm an embarrassment. You know, I'm not putting up with this. I got to keep up with the guy next door. I'm tired of him shoving this in my face all the time. And it's like, great. I'm no longer going to sell that individual an irrigation system that is going to be head-to-head and is going to cover his yard and easy to maintain and has a turf guard or whatever. And I'm not going to tell him about that stuff. I'm going to tell him I've got an irrigation system for you that's going to quiet your neighbors up so you'll become the envy of the neighborhood. Envy is the personal motive, and that's the direction that I want to go. I want to know my customers well enough so that I have a pretty good idea of what their personal motives are. And the reality of it is, in a sales presentation, I only have to ask a couple of additional questions to uncover those personal motives. But they're two questions that can make all the difference in the world in my effectiveness in earning that customer's business. So when the guy says, you know what, I've always thought about an irrigation system, you know, I've got the money to do it now, I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger on it. And we say, well, great, you know, let me tell you a bit about our company, our irrigation system. Don't do that. Stop. Wait for just a second and say, well, that's great. Tell me why you've thought so long about an irrigation system. Just a couple of more questions to uncover their personal motives, the why they're going to make this investment. And it doesn't make any difference if we're selling to a municipality, if it's a golf course, if it's a sports field to grounds, if it's a university, if it's a homeowner. We are selling to a human being, and that human being, even at a corporate level for a university complex, they will have an emotional reason for making the decision they make on who to buy from. And if you're the one that uncovers that emotional reason for buying, and we can give that back or feed that back as the benefit in our sales presentation, we're the ones that's going to earn that business. It just is almost magic. It's why we call it the kind of the unfair advantage, if you will. So another tool in knowing our customer is what we call a customer profile. And you guys can Google this too. You'll see a lot of information out there on it. You guys can work through John or Mel. I can email you an example of a customer profile if you ask for it. But what it is it's just basically a one-page document. Some people have bigger ones. But it shows the name of the customer, their address, the phone number, what type of customer it is, how we found them, was it a referral from somebody. It tells us if they're the decision maker or just an influencer. By the way, that's two different types of buying roles that exist when we're dealing with customers. An influencer we describe as someone who can say no to the purchase but can't say yes. And the decision maker is the person that can say yes, that has the check, signs the checkbook. And if the influencer is a big enough influence, they're every bit as important as the decision maker. But we need to know who's who when we're making a sale. In my customer profile, I have a task motive and a personal motive. I have what their current irrigation system is, even if it's a hose and sprinklers are pulling around the yard. I want to know my customer's current situation and their desired situation, so that's listed on my customer profile. And I have listed here on the customer profile what their hobbies are. It gives me some commonality to talk about with them maybe. There's a place for their birthday, spouse's name. One caveat on the birthday, I once bought a car a few weeks before my birthday one year, and the salesperson sent me a plant for my birthday, and it came while I was at work and my wife was at home, and the salesperson's name, I don't remember her name now, but let's just say it was Wendy, and it said, hope your birthday is great, you know, see you again, Wendy. And I got home and my wife was sitting there and didn't say I got a plant or anything for my birthday from somebody. She said, who's Wendy? And I didn't know who the hell Wendy was. I couldn't remember the salesperson's name. It was a car salesperson, right? And I said, I don't know who it is. So my wife ended up, you know, she trust but verify deal. She was a Ronald Reagan fan, and so she ended up calling the floor place to find out. And it's like, oh, it came from a, you know, a Honda dealer, and it's like, oh, it was the car salesperson. It was weird. So all of that just to say, you know, I love sending thank you notes. I highly advocate sending thank you notes to your customers after a sale. I highly advocate sending thank you notes to your customers after they gave you the opportunity to make a sale but didn't buy from you. And I do that, by the way, because when we lose an opportunity, that thank you for not buying from us really isn't the end of this sales process. It's the beginning of the next sales process. So don't get mad when they didn't buy from you. Just figure you didn't do enough to earn the business, but thank them for the opportunity anyways. But the birthday cards that people send sometimes, that salespeople send, if you don't have a real deep and outside of business relationship with someone, don't send them a birthday card because it's weird, and they may think it's weird too, like a lot of people do. So aside from the customer profile, one other way reason that we need to know our customer is so that we can develop a valid value proposition for our customers. And that value proposition is simply stated, it's the promise of value to be delivered and the belief from the customer that the value will be experienced. A value proposition explains how your product solves the customer's problems and improves their situation. It delivers specific, quantified benefits. It tells the ideal customer why they should buy from you and not your competition. So if I woke you up at 3 o'clock in the morning out of a dead sleep and asked you why you and not your competition, it should be so ingrained in you that you can tell me that out of a dead sleep. You can't think. You can't hesitate. You can't throw a bunch of ums in there, because if you don't know why I should buy from you and not your competition, who's going to know? So you have to put some thought into that in advance and really, really have a succinct statement that goes into your value proposition on why you. In reality, that's the heart of the value proposition. Here's why you should buy from us. And it should be brought up throughout your customer's buying experience with you. So keep in mind, it's not solely a single line of text. You see the Toro logo is count on it. That's not a value proposition. That's a marketing tagline or logo. The value proposition is probably a paragraph or a half paragraph long, and you put it together, number one, by knowing your customer, knowing what the kind of things your typical customer looks for, and then you have to link how you're going to deliver that benefit, or how you're going to deliver the value to the customer, and then be able to clearly state the difference between you and your competition and why you. And I will tell you that if you're like we are at Toro, and we go to market as the price leader, and in marketing parlance that means that we are probably going to be a higher price. We're not the low price guy. We get that. We hope that you aren't either, that you're getting the value that you're worth. But if you're going to sell at a higher price than your competition and get what you earn, you better be able to clearly communicate why you're worth more than the other guy, and you can't hesitate in doing it. So let's talk briefly here about leveraging your marketing, and a couple of different things. Marketing has typically focused on what we call the 4 Ps of marketing. That's product development, price determination, the place of distribution, and promotion. So we don't always get to determine where we're selling it from, the place of distribution. The product development, you guys aren't necessarily building the product. You get to decide how it maybe is put in the ground and how it's laid out, designed. So that's your part of the product development. Price determination, you certainly know what your market will bear as far as pricing for your services. But the promotion part is really where the marketing piece that we want to talk about a little bit today. And here's the thing, for most companies, and Toro is certainly no exception, most companies, big and small, will determine their marketing budget as a percentage of sales. And so marketing is viewed as kind of an annual expense. And so in most companies, marketing expenditures represent about 15 or 20% of the revenue dollars will go into marketing. That's on the high end. So the interesting thing is that from that same dollar, 4 to 7% is devoted to like capital budgeting. But capital budgeting expenses are really carefully analyzed and treated as investments. But marketing is treated as an expense. And so my own, and by the way, this is not necessarily the Toro opinion, but my personal business opinion, after hanging around in this industry for 20 years and selling for over 30 years, is that we need to look more at marketing, at our marketing dollars as an investment. And don't say, well, if I make $200 this year, I'm going to spend $50 on marketing. And if I make $100 this year, I'm only going to spend $25 on marketing. My recommendation is that we look at marketing as an investment and say that I'm going to put into my budget $200 for marketing, with the understanding that it may take a year or two to see a return on that investment, like any other investment. We need to decide, is our marketing dollars going to be an expense or is it going to be an investment? The smaller, healthier companies, the ones that break into new territories, are the ones that today will look at marketing as an investment and say, I'm going to invest this much in marketing no matter what my revenue is, and look at it as an investment. And understand it's going to take some time. So we need to look at our marketing goals in determining the level of investment we're willing to make. And we can look at what our, well, let's put it this way. If we're an expense-minded marketer, we're gonna ask our questions. What are my projected sales for the coming year? Are my dollars of advertising on par with my competitors? Are my spend ratios for marketing in industry norms? All stuff you can find online today, by the way. And then we start thinking about, am I losing or gaining share, and how do I reduce my marketing expenses? And that's when we think about marketing as an expense. But if we're a marketing investor, we tend to think more in terms of what are my long-term marketing goals? Do I want to maintain my installed base of customers? Do I want to market to those customers in hopes of getting more referrals? Do I want to break into a new county where I haven't been before? I've looked at my city and county data book, and I see a rich field of opportunity over here in a county I've never done business with before. What are your marketing goals? And then, which in that new territory, which customers are you going to seek? Are you looking for high-end, medium customers? But determine what your marketing goals are, and in that way you'll be able to leverage a marketing investment far more than someone who sees marketing as just an expense. When marketing is an expense, you become very tactical in your marketing. When marketing is an investment, you become much more strategic in your marketing. There's a lot of marketing professionals that would disagree with that, but that's because they're expense-minded marketers. So let's talk here in our last few minutes before we open it up for some questions. But let's talk about word of mouth a little bit. And I will tell you that word of mouth advertising and word of mouth impressions is unbelievably influential in our ability to achieve future business. And I'll tell you, with the internet playing a role in it, it's more impactful than ever. But here's some statistics to get you thinking about this a little bit. 50% of purchase decisions are influenced by word of mouth. 50%. And the research study, by the way, says that 70% of our customers that contact us, or 70% of our customers that contact us, are more than 80% of the way towards a brand decision before they ever contact us. So they'll know if they want Hunter, Rainbird, or Toro before they ever contact you guys. Here's the problem with that. They got a lot of that information off the internet, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not. This might come as a shock to you, but not everything you read on the internet happens to be true. And so a lot of times our customers are armed with this word-of-mouth stuff that they heard on the internet, and it's bad information, and they're speaking bad of you or your product line, and you have to be aware of that so that you can counteract that. You may be swimming upstream from the get-go because they saw something online that was untrue, and yet they tend to believe it. They believe customers, on average, place much more faith in even anonymous statements online than they will put in the statements of a salesperson. That's bad for us in sales, but we have to be aware of that. 1,000 customers can generate 500,000 conversations about a brand online. That's how it can spread online today. Here's the stat I was thinking about a second ago. 92% of consumers trust recommendations from friends and family more than any other form of advertising, and just 10% trust the statements from brands today. That's a staggering statistic. But we have to be aware of how word of mouth influences people today. 81% of people that we do business with are influenced by their friends' posts on social media, on Facebook, and word of mouth. And here's a good statistic. 66% of brand mentions on the social web, on Facebook and Twitter and all the other ones that I don't even know about, are positive. We tend to think of it that they're all negative, but the reality is most of them are positive. And here's an interesting stat too, I think. 25% of search results for the world's 20 largest brands are links to user-generated content published via social media. If you have a customer out there that posts a link about your product or what you're selling, what you're representing, and it's negative, they're gonna click on it in a ton of cases. So, and 89% of consumers believe that customer testimonials are the most effective content, with 70% reviewing online customer reviews when they first consider a brand. one of the strongest things you can do to help your business grow is to get testimonials from your satisfied customers. Either ask them to write a letter or write the letter for them and put it on your letterhead and ask them to sign it. Ask them to make you a video testimonial. Ask if they're a really satisfied customer, if you have a prospect that's kind of hanging on the fence, if it would be okay for a prospect to give them a call and get you an endorsement. You have 2 or 3 of those kinds of greatly satisfied customers in your back pocket so that you can use that when you need to. And I don't know how many of you guys are messing around yet with Twitter or Facebook or have a Facebook page for your organization, your company, but if you do, you need to closely monitor that, because if somebody starts to trash you out there online, that's a real problem, and you've got to try to nip that in the bud, because it spreads incredibly fast today. And right or wrong, people believe what they see online. So that's about it. We're out of time. I want to leave a few minutes for any questions that might come up, and I hope that what we've accomplished so far has been of some use for you. And again, if you can work through John or Mel to get my contact information. If you have questions, I'm certainly available to take phone calls from you guys offline too. So, John, with that, I'll turn it back over to you, and you can moderate any questions that may have come in.
Great. Well, we have 3 minutes, so there's one question. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Steve. And we're going to provide a copy of, if you don't mind sending me a copy of the customer profile sheet, I'll go ahead and get that out. We had a few requests for that.
Okay.
We had one question, and I think it's the only time we have this for one question. What is your opinion of things like services such as Angie's List and things like that?
Well, you know, I don't have a lot of experience with it. I will tell you that the people running that organization have done just a wonderful job of building up their own credibility, so the consumers that use it believe in it wholeheartedly. And apparently, Angie's List has done a pretty good job of weeding out, excuse me, the weak players. So in fact, they've earned that credibility to a large extent. So I'm pretty high on it without any real personal experience. But the people that I know that have used it on both sides, from the vendor side and the customer side, I've never heard anybody really speak poorly of it.
Good. Well, your email address is up on our screen right now. So if anybody has any questions for Steve, right there's his email address. Please feel free to reach out to him. We'll go ahead and get a copy of the customer profile sheet out to everyone along with the recording of the webinar. So please feel free to take note of that email address. And if you have any questions, send them directly to Steve. At the beginning of the webinar, Mel mentioned the upcoming webinars on March 20th and April 17th. There they are right there. Feature ones on irrigation.org/webinar_series. So there they are. And then, Mel, that's all the time we have. There's my information and your information. Do you have any final words for everyone before we depart?
Well, I'm looking at the numbers of people that we've had attend, and it's very good. We've kept everybody's interest, and nobody's left us early. So,
yeah.
Steve, you were right on target with what our listeners were looking for. We deeply appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you at our shows. Thanks, John.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Mel. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in a future webinar.
Take care.